Welcome to the Theology Brewers. Hope you've enjoyed listening to any of our past episodes, all 4 glorious episodes that we've had.
And one interview.
And one interview,
So
which by far is our crowning glory. Definitely our claim to fame and success there.
Yeah.
Which isn't saying a lot, I guess. So technically 5, 4.5, because we did that under the Reg Reform Guys banner. So, whatever.
But it was
Yanni,
extra
am I
long.
boring you that much already? We just started.
No, I'm just tired. I work a lot, and it's been a busy week.
By work he means Apex Legends work.
I mean 14+ hour shifts of work.
Of Apex
and
Legends.
Snow. Dude, it's been snowing so much here. It's been horrible. Normally I like snow.
Twice now.
More than that. It was almost every night I got stuck somewhere different. It's been crazy driving through the mountains in the snow. Usually Utah doesn't get this much snow, but now all of a sudden it decided it's a winter wonderland. It's crazy.
Yeah, and for those of you that follow our social network feed, you know what I've been doing.
He's been on the beach taking selfies because apparently he doesn't work either.
Been on the beach taking selfies because I don't get my truck stuck in the snow because there's no snow down here in lovely Florida where it's been in the 70s and 80s. So I got home Thursday from work and nobody was home. Stephen wasn't here. Faith and Amethyst weren't here. So I said to myself, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to the beach. So I went to the beach by myself. It was awesome. Took a book, lawn chair, and just living it up. Living 10 minutes from the beach is how to do it, people. Today I got I'm still in that text thread for Minneapolis' snow emergency. Thanks, because when you live downtown, you have to park in specific places. So I sent out a little Twitter jab on that one too, and Facebook to my friends who live in Minneapolis still. Hey, it's 80 degrees here, and you guys have a snow emergency.
Yeah, but I will take the bad weather for a few months to live in a town with only sub 500 people.
There's towns in Florida.
It's a fair trade.
That.
Not 10 minutes from the beach.
No.
Facts.
At least not a beach that you could go to.
Right.
That's true.
I'll take my less people.
Here. It's a little ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm not that big of a people person. I don't like it. I don't like traffic. And I'd like to be able to shoot things off my front porch.
Well, I could. It's just illegal.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all right.
Okay,
right.
so we're wasting time because, we're trying to keep these at 30 minutes, and the last one went really long.
Which is hard to do. I know, but nobody wants to... Well, nobody wants to listen to us to begin with, but nobody wants to listen to us just drivel on about academic stuff. And I mean...
No, instead they want to hear you talk about how nice Florida is while they're freezing somewhere in the north.
How nice Florida is.
That's legit.
Yeah. Well, hey. All right, well, so... We have a couple guests lined up, which we're pretty excited about. Some future topics. Seth Pastor is going to be our next guest. He's going to talk about the Lord's Supper. And this is going to be kind of under the theme. Eventually. We're kind of doing this under the theme that we've been doing, How Church is Church. So is Pastor going to come on and talk about different views of the Lord's Supper and how different churches view those, and how then the Reformed community, which since we're Reformed, how we see it.
Because, believe it or not, it is actually different from mainstream evangelicalism. I mean, it's not weird.
Catholicism, and yeah, exactly. Yeah,
but there's more to it than what mainstream evangelicalism gives it credit for.
Oh, absolutely. It's evangelicals are pretty anemic, to be honest, in their theology of the Lord's Supper, and
in general,
whereas we Reformed Protestants would say that the Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholics are overly doing it in some things. But again, we want to talk about that. We are Reformed, yes, but we do want to try to help people just have a place to go to understand other groups a little bit better too. So like, hey, what does the Catholic Church think about the Lord's Supper? This is a podcast you could come to.
We need to get a
maybe get some
resident
answers on
Catholic that we can just interview on it, like as a regular.
Invite on to. Yeah, there's actually a couple I know that I could probably get on to talk, and some other groups. So we'll develop that as we go too. Right now we're still just trying to get out there and get our feet wet. So I'll just put that plug in now. Like, subscribe, share, rate us on iTunes. That would really help us
a lot
to be able to do that. Because
no
again,
one knows
we want
who we
you
are.
guys to have an Instagram. Right. We would like to be able to get more people on to help answer some of these questions in a shorter podcast. It's not an hour and a half long. And there's a lot of people doing what we're doing out there, which is why we'll also give reference material to things. But sometimes somebody says it a different way that it clicks, that the person you listened to before, it didn't click, So, people ask, why are you reinventing the wheel? It's not necessarily that. It's just giving the presentations from another take, if that makes sense. So before we started, though, I did want to do something real quick, just kind of as a practical, useful tool for you while you're sitting in church taking notes or doing your own personal Bible study and stuff. So those of you that know John Piper and his ministry, he started this thing called Look at the Book. And what he's been doing is he goes through and he has this, you just see the screen, and you can go check it out at desiringgod.org. No, we're not sponsored, or they're not sponsoring, or however that stuff works. But you can go on there, and all you see is the text on the screen, and it's a black background with the white lettering, and you see him start circling things and drawing lines and doing all that. So
it gets colorful quick.
That was what?
Said it gets colorful quick.
It does get very colorful very quick. But that was harder to do. They had to write their own program for that back when he first started doing that. Well, now we've gotten so far with this is just in the last 3 years even, that we've come so far in our mobile technologies that we can just do that super quick. So I'm going to do a thing here, and we'll show it to you, that I've been playing around with in church. Now I'm going to do this on an iPad. The principles, I think, will be generally the same for Android devices. I'm not sure, because I don't use one.
Because they're trash.
I think you'll be able to...
Had to throw that out there.
Don't get us... No, great. Now we're alienating a whole other group of people. So I'm going to run through this real quick before we get into today's topic. So what I do is I have Olive Tree. I love Olive Tree. It's hard to... There's so many good Bible software programs out there. It's hard to narrow down on one. My advice is just pick one and stick with it. And I've invested a bunch of stuff now into this with resources and stuff. But they have this night mode that's really cool now. It's like a dark theme. Like Apple's been doing this stuff too, where it's black on white now instead of like the grayish it was before. So what I do is I zoom in. Let's say I'm going through... I should have selected a text. But I'm just going to go through this random one here, and I blow up the text to pretty large, and then what I'll do is I'll take a screenshot of it, if I can remember how to do that on the pros. Oh, guess what? We're upside down. I'm going to take a screenshot of it, okay, and then I'll edit that screenshot real quick just to select the text that I want, and then I'm going to throw it into notes. So you can throw it into your albums if you want. I'm just going to do it as a new note, save. And now that image is going to be there when I go into my notes. Okay. Now I'm going to use the Apple Pencil because my wife has a nice Apple iPad Pro here. And it's just easier. But when you click on the image then, you go to the top corner there and just hit markup. And now, you can do this with your finger. You don't need a fancy... the newest iPad or whatever. It's just any iPad for the most part now that has markup, or even your phones and stuff. But you can go through and then you can start highlighting stuff. So a thing I do, like, I'm developing my own key right now, but if I'm focusing on, well, I'll show you here. But we ought always to give thanks to God for you. So ought always to give thanks is kind of the verb that we're using. Ought always to give thanks. We is the people ought to. And to who are we supposed to do that to? It's to God. But what are we giving thanks to God about? What's that topic? For you. And so then you can start, it just helps you slow down and read the text. It doesn't even have to be anything deep or fancy or anything like that. It just kind of helps. And you can start, Piper does arcing, and that's its whole other thing, which is really cool. But just if you're just taking notes and you're going through and you're seeing stuff, you're like, oh, that's really interesting. You know, you could switch to the highlighter and you can do like brothers, beloved by the Lord. I have no idea. Again, random text here. But anyway, it's just a cool little thing you can do. Super simple and easy. You know, you can circle stuff and you can, you know, highlight other things and you can change the size of your thing. So now you can write really small, like hello, you know, just random stuff. So, well, hopefully not random stuff. But anyway, it's just a really cool tool to be able to go through and just slowly take a passage and you can start doing cool things. Anyway, I just want to get that out there. It's been really helpful for me just recently doing that. But anyway, you guys take a look at that and, you know, hey, share some of that too. Like, drop some stuff, things you're noticing in your reading and in the note taking, and share it. Post it on our Facebook or Twitter or whatever.
I don't think they can post on our
if
Facebook.
It's helpful. You can post on our wall.
Really? It'd have to be a link.
So. We'll make it so you can post on the wall.
I don't know.
Like,
we'll have to look into it.
Tag our Facebook. But anyway.
Yeah.
I just want to get it out there real quick. So, Seth, what's today's topic?
Well, I watched this 1.5 hour long documentary that I highly recommend you guys go watch after we're done talking about this. Because like I said, it's like 1.5 hours long, and we have, maybe 15, 20 minutes to talk about this topic. It covers a lot. It's called The God Who Speaks, and it was all about, basically, biblical reliability. Focused on a lot of, like the New Testament and the canon, and why some books are in the Bible and others are not, and kind of just answered some questions on skeptics. So we kind of figured we'd talk about that a little bit and bring it to your attention. So we want to start with like the New Testament, because we can do that.
Yeah, why don't we start with so why do we as Christians trust the New Testament as a historical, reliable document?
That's a good question.
Let's just start there. If you want to jump into
what
you took away maybe from that.
Like I said, I've listened to several lectures on this. I've read books on this. But honestly, when it comes down to it, it doesn't matter, and this might offend some people, it might not. It doesn't matter whether you actually believe. How do I word this? Okay, what it comes down to is there is a lot of evidence, and some people are going to believe it and some aren't. And that's basically just where it drops, okay? Some people will believe the evidence, some won't. There's a lot of faith that goes into this because, well, guess what? It's called faith, religion, faith go hand in hand. So there is faith to it, obviously, but that doesn't mean there's no evidence for the historical accuracy or for the reliability we have. So like the New Testament, as far as any other work of antiquity goes, the closest, as far as manuscript evidence we have, the closest is Homer's Iliad. And it only has, I think, 1,800 copies. Which, by the way, there's a pretty large gap between that one and the next one. Like, that's a lot of manuscripts for any work of antiquity. But at this point, there's over 60,000 manuscripts of the Bible. That gap.
It includes multiple languages.
Right, and that's multiple languages found in different places throughout history, and they continue to uncover more because only a couple years back, it was less, a lot less. It's been crazy the finds they have. The oldest one we have dates back to the second century, early hundreds. Like
about 150.
That's unheard of in any work of antiquity. And so
that's ink's not even dry kind of copy.
Right.
Because most of the works that we have are hundreds of years. Like, for example, Livy, Tacitus, Suetonius, these are all historians that we use their stuff to kind of base a good bit of our knowledge off of history. That we have about 30 extant manuscripts of Livy's writings. and they're about 300 years after Livy wrote the original, right? Tacitus, same thing. That we have 3 manuscripts of Tacitus, and the first one we have is 800 years after he wrote his original. So the fact that we have over in the original, let's even just go with Greek manuscripts, right? So fragmentary or whole, we have around 5,800 Greek manuscripts, which is what the New Testament was written in. We're talking that our earliest fragment is from 150, where
on
John
papyrus.
probably wrote in sometime after 70 AD, probably.
It's debatable.
In the
I
first
hold
century.
the earlier position.
Well, I'm just saying within the first century.
Right, yeah, we don't
Either
need
way,
to get
we're
into that.
talking second century. I wasn't trying to give a date for John. I'm just saying that the fact that we have something so incredibly close is absolutely unheard of. And then to have the amount of manuscripts that we have is just mind-blowing. There's a reason this kind of information is ignored. Like, there is nothing in history that you've learned before the printing press and photocopiers and things like that you can trust anywhere near what you
everything
can trust
you know about
the
ancient Rome, ancient Greece, Babylon, anything, any of those. Like, if someone is going to question the New Testament based on, like, well, there's this much time between when it happened, when it was written, that's baloney, because they take our knowledge of history, for the most part. There's some really skeptical skeptics out there, but for the most part, they accept our other general knowledge of history based off of hundreds of years of gaps.
We just accept it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that is not a valid
barely any manuscripts.
skepticism. Like that's not a valid argument. You can raise questions about other things, but yeah.
Right. It's intellectually obtuse to say that we can't trust that the New Testament says what was actually written. Now, whether that makes the contents true or not, that is a separate topic, admittedly. Right. But what we are absolutely assured of is that what we have is what was written. Right. There's no corruption. There's no government control stuff. And just real quick, because you're going to hear this, Bart Ehrman is a major skeptic out there that most people know. He claims he used to be a Christian and then left the faith, and he's a New Testament textual critic.
And he's very intelligent. Actually. Like, he knows a lot. Way more than probably 90% of Christians. Like,
I would give it higher than that. Yeah,
probably,
and he's funny. He's great to listen to in terms of sense of humor and things like that. He and Dan Wallace have done a couple debates that we'll put in the show notes too. Him and James White have done it. Actually, most Christians try to debate him who do this kind of stuff. He's just kind of a name out there to debate. But in terms of this topic, but he's going to get up there and tell you that there's over like 400,000 errors in the New Testament. So there's more errors than there are words in the New Testament. Well, it's a misrepresentation, and it's intentional, because no two manuscripts are alike. That's true. No two manuscripts are alike. So
they were hand copied.
Right.
Like, keep that in mind.
So, right. So the example that Daniel Wallace gives, and I might have given it on the show before, but just real quick, if I put the Gettysburg Address up on the board, like I'll project it up on the board, and I tell people to hand copy the Gettysburg Address, 30 people in the room, you're going to get 30 different copies of the Gettysburg Address because someone's going to put T-O instead of T-O-O, right? But if I then take the projection off the screen, how would I get back to the original to know exactly what that original one said, even though there's errors in these 30 manuscripts?
You collect them. I'm going to tell you guys because I'm your cheat sheet. You're going to collect them all, and then you're going to look, and you're going to compare, and you're going to see, well, this guy wrote 4 instead of 2. Well, is that the correct reading? Well, no, that doesn't make sense in the sentence. So this word should be 2, as these other manuscripts of the Gettysburg Address tell me.
As the other 29 manuscripts say.
That's called textual criticism.
Like,
in a very dumbed-down nutshell.
Yeah, it is, where we collate the manuscripts. Now we have thousands of manuscripts. So the more manuscripts you have, the more errors you have. But that's awesome. What people don't get is that's great, because the more we have, the more we can compare and get back to what was originally written. It's like Daniel Wallace says, we have a 1,000-piece puzzle with 1,001 pieces, kind of thing.
Or we have,
so
what do you say? And the show, I think he said we have 110% of the Bible.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Because there's things like expansions of piety. So as time went on, people said, well, just saying the Lord said this isn't good enough. We should have the Lord Jesus said this. And then later
Right.
on, scribes are like, oh, well, the Lord Jesus Christ said this. Scribes were much more inclined to add than to subtract. So
Right.
anyway,
And
that's New Testament veracity in a nutshell. We know that what we have in the New Testament is what was written.
Right.
We are assured of that. There are disputed passages where there's things that are in the manuscript traditions that are a little dicey. The pericope adultery, or the woman caught in adultery, there's some questions in that passage as to whether it was original. And what was that one, Seth?
Long ending of Mark. And when it comes to those, I mean, we don't have time to go into those right now.
No.
When it comes to those, though, again, and this is kind of awesome because he hates the fact that he ever wrote this, and I'm probably pretty sure he wishes he could take it back. Bart Ehrman's book, it was in an appendix, I believe. He wrote that despite all of those errors that he may claim exist, not one, if you composed a Bible that had every wild mistake in it, right, and put them all into one Bible, you would not change one single Christian doctrine. Not one.
Yeah, there's no essential Christian. Well, he would say
no essential
Christian.
Right. Possibly some secondary.
Because there are
debatable though.
Right. No essential Christian doctrines are affected by these variants. And so that's why, though, if you people are using different Bible versions, which we all are, you'll see that there's sometimes differences. Some verses are in the footnotes, where some are in the text. If you have a King James and New King James, there's verses that aren't in the main text, or that are in the main text that in like the ESV and NIV aren't. They're in the footnotes or something, and that has to do with manuscript textual comparison.
Right.
That's not a bad thing to be able to go through and look at this stuff.
This is a really important note I'm going to hit on real quick because we're not getting into King James onlyism right now. But something that's important to note on this very topic is that the King James version of the Bible is, in and of itself, a translation of the original Greek manuscripts, which not obviously the originals, but codices, mainly Erasmus, Stephanus, and Beza. Okay, it is translated from those. It itself is a translation. Therefore, it is not the comparative tool that we take other translations to. We take the ESV, the NASB, the NIV, we take these back to the manuscripts, and you should do the same with the King James. The King James Bible served great for several hundred years. It's rather outdated, and there are some errors in it, and I know a lot of people don't like hearing that, but the fact is, you have to use the manuscripts as the underlying, bar. The bar is set with the manuscripts. It's not set with the King James Bible. So when you say, well, this verse is missing from the King James, or missing from the NIV, and it's in the King James, it was deleted. Well, that's not how that works. They didn't take the King James Bible, be like, okay, well, we're writing the NIV here, and, we don't like that in the King James, so we're just scrubbing that. No, they probably didn't consult the King James Bible, because that's not what they use to translate the new translations from, unless you're the NKJV.
Right. Right.
Anyway.
So a lot of you might not have run into these people before. Some of us,
I'm sure a lot of
grew
you
up in a
have,
world
though.
like that too, where there's King James only people, or they have a very high esteem view of the King James. And again, it's a great translation. It really is.
Right.
It's a beautiful translation. There are some things though that, like every translation, by the way, that probably isn't the most accurate or the best way to render something, especially if depending on your interpretation philosophies and stuff. But Romans 6, for example, the translators, for some reason, Paul says, how should we who are dead to sin continue any longer therein? God forbid, is what the King James says. But no Greek manuscript says God forbid. It's an idiom they threw in there. It actually says may it never be. And that's from the Byzantine traditions as well, which I don't want to get into Western, Eastern, Byzantine. All that stuff's being thrown out the window for the most part anyway, with this new thing that I don't know anything about that Dr. White's tried to talk about on his program, but it's,
that goes over my head.
Over my head right now. But so there's, the thing is to remember that the original manuscripts were what was inspired, what was originally written and penned by the apostles and whoever. Since then, we've had copies, but what's so wonderful about these copies, and so what's so wonderful about this, is the text was never controlled. And I think this is important. There's this big internet myth out there that Emperor Constantine decided to be this controlling element, and they put the Bible together at the Council of Nicaea. This is the most disprovable thing out there. Yet
and
it
misquoted.
is so widely perpetuated that it just blows my mind. It's almost the equivalent of saying that the moon is made of green cheese. We know it's not made of green cheese. It's so easy to disprove. The Bible, the canon of the scriptures, which we're not going to get into canon on this episode. We're going to stay on New Testament stuff because we'll
save
don't have
that
time,
one for another
and
one.
I want to give some time to it. It wasn't talked about the Council of Nicaea. The Council of Nicaea had to do with the nature of Christ and his human nature, his divine nature, things like that.
Where we get the Nicene
Bible was
Creed, which,
never
by the way, Nicene Creed is very important.
Yeah, Nicene, memorize it if you have.
Yes.
The Bible was never under a governmental controlled entity. However, so this is to contrast it.
But the
with,
Westminster
the
Confession
Quran.
of Faith was. Cough, cough.
So the 1689 London Baptist Confession. I'm missing your point.
Nope, we were rebels. We were illegal. Go ahead.
The Quran, though, for example. So when they started writing down the Quran, copying it, they this is historically true, and Islamic scholars will be honest about this. As guys started who had memorized the Quran, because it's about the third the size of the New Testament, as guys started dying off that had memorized the whole thing, they're like, oh shoot, we need to write this stuff down because these guys are all dying in these wars and stuff, and we're not going to have the Quran. So they start writing it down. Well, in that process, you start getting different editions of the Quran, and they're like, well, we can't have that because this is God's word to us. They have a very dictatorial view of Scripture. So basically, they collected all the manuscripts and burnt all the ones that were variants and decided this is the one. So some guy later says this is the one. And so it was controlled by them, and they got rid of all the variants. That's not a good way to do that, because what if they if the Quran was truly from God, what if they threw out the wrong one? You know, and it actually was supposed to say something else. That's just, the New Testament wasn't that way. It was copied so fast and spread so broad that it was never able to be corrupted or controlled. So now what we do is, it makes it a little messy, but we have enough. We just look at it and we get back to what it originally said, which is just awesome. That's the difference between a controlled transmission and a free transmission. And so we don't believe that the copies themselves are necessarily we don't believe the copies are inspired. But we do believe they carry the inspired word and the inspired message. So for us, Christians, when we pick up a Bible, we say this is God's word. Even though we know that there are variants and things like that, that doesn't affect the doctrine of inerrancy or anything like that, which we can cover in another episode too, what that actually means. But it's just a very different understanding of how that stuff works, and it's awesome because we know that we have what was written.
Right. And so God did not breathe the MacArthur Study Bible into existence, right? That's what we mean by that. Not to mention the other areas. But I really wanted to, study Bibles actually bring up this point. So the extra stuff, okay, and this is not to go into too much canonicity stuff, but so when you talk about how do we know we have what was written, that's going to intersect with things like the Apocrypha, etc. And I mean, we can cover that fairly shortly.
Right.
So you have the Apocrypha, the Book of Enoch, and the Gospel of Thomas, and you have these other books that people are like, well, why aren't those in the Bible? You have what was written, well, why aren't these books in the Bible? And I mean, to sum it up very quickly, and we could probably cover this more in depth when we talk about canonicity at some point. But so my MacArthur Study Bible, my ESV Study Bible, or my Reformation Study Bible, any of these have a lot of things that we do not believe are the inspired Word of God, right? They have their study notes, they're extra things. And so a lot of times the Apocrypha has been found in the middle of rolled up in these scrolls or however the codices were found, manuscripts were found.
Right.
that doesn't mean those people thought it was part of the inspired text, because there is some accurate history within, like the Maccabees. Like the Maccabean War was a legitimate thing; it happened. Historically, there is some truth to these things, but that doesn't mean, like, I think there's some truth in MacArthur's study notes. That doesn't mean that's the inspired word of God, right?
Yeah.
And to be fair, just going to throw this out there so I don't lose my Reformed Baptist card, my 1689 Reformed Baptist card. That is not my main study Bible, but I have it. I disagree with him on several secondary issues, but yeah, I do own one. But it's the one sitting in front of me right now, so that's why I used that one as an example. But yeah, we can talk about that stuff more in depth, but it is like there are things that we've found with manuscripts that we do not believe are inspired by God as scripture, and part of that comes from the fact that the ideas in them or doctrine in them does not match the rest of Scripture, because if you look at the Old Testament, you look at the New Testament, there's a consistency that these extra books don't have with it. Like the Gospel of Thomas, I think, is the one they use as an example, and it says some stuff that is very not what Jesus would have said, and it's like, yeah, this is probably not inspired, and definitely not written by Thomas. And some of that was sorted out.
Yeah, you're jumping into a bigger
right,
you're
just whetting your appetite.
I would like to do, but yeah,
whetting your appetite.
So we'll whet your appetite. So here I have a list of books. The differences between these, and we weren't going to go into this, but again, we'll whet the appetite, like you said.
Yeah.
So in the Protestant Bible, there are 66 books. Okay, Genesis through Malachi. In the Roman Catholic Bible,
he means Revelation.
There's actually
for the whole 66.
There's a couple. Well, just Old Testament here is what I'm looking at, because that's where the differences is. The Apocrypha that are considered Old Testament books. So in the Roman Catholic Old Testament, you've got in and throughout 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Kings, which actually I think they're counting Samuel and the Kings. Yeah, that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Samuel and the Kings. 1st and 2nd Esdras, Tobit, Judith, 1st and 2nd Maccabees, Canticle of Canticles, which is Song of Solomon, Wisdom of Solomon, Ecclesiasticus, or also known as Sirach, and then you've got Baruch, and then you've got, which Baruch includes the Epistle of Jeremiah, and then in the Eastern Orthodox Bible, you've got even more, and they list them a bit different. It's 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Kingdoms, which is 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. You have 1st and 2nd Ezra, which is also known as 1st and 2nd Esdras, which is in the Roman Catholic how it's listed, right? You've got 1st, 2nd, 3rd Maccabees. You've got 151 Psalms in number. And then you've got Epistle of Jeremiah, Lamentation of Jeremiah, which I think is just Lamentations, if I'm right. Yeah. So, yeah, you've got the Eastern Orthodox Bible has more than the Catholic Bible, which has more than the Protestant Bible. And why is that? Why are there different books in the in the Bible? Why do different Christian groups or claimingly Christian groups have different books? So, and that gets into other things too. The Roman Mormons, the Mormons claim to be Christian, and they have the Book of Mormon, the Pearl of Christ, Doctrines and Covenants, and Seth, come on, you live in Mormon.
Doctrine of Covenants, Book of Mormon, King James Bible, Doctrine of Covenants, Pearl of Great Price.
Pearl of Great Price.
You named them.
Yeah, but isn't there? Oh, yeah.
They usually are all rolled
Jehovah's
up into
Witnesses.
one Bible. Like they get the King
they have
James
the Book of
Bible
Mormon
and it has the
separate,
Book
then
of
Pearl
Mormon
of Great Price and Doctrines and Covenants are in their own other
in the
blue
King James
little book.
Well, no, I'm talking like so you can buy them all in one Bible, is what like. So
Yeah,
it'll have
well,
all
I'll
four
bring them out
in
next
yeah.
time. Yeah,
Right.
I have them.
And Jehovah's Witnesses have their own
Witnesses,
translation, which doesn't count as a translation. Yeah,
the New World Translation, which is not a translation, it's a perversion. It's actually more dangerous, I think, than things like the Quran and stuff, because at least people know that the Quran isn't the Bible in terms of it's
Right.
not the Christian Bible. New World Translation goes and they intentionally
Right.
talk about a controlled translation. That's exactly what
Yeah.
we're actually talking about. Is that was
Right.
controlled by a group that intentionally went in and changed things to match their doctrine instead of getting their doctrine from the text. So that's
And see,
interesting.
the Mormons
anyway,
don't even do that. They don't change the King James Bible. They just say
just-
that it's
well,
only
Joseph Smith
correct
did,
in so
actually.
much. Well, he did, but the one they used a pretty standard one.
Yeah.
But he said, not he said. Wow. Anyhow, so the King James, they use King James Bible, but they say that it is. They use it insofar as it is translated correctly. So basically, where it contradicts the Book of Mormon, it wasn't translated correctly. So therefore, the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, exactly.
That's their way around that.
Yeah.
But they don't actually didn't create their own translation like the Jehovah's Witness did. Even though Joseph Smith
Yeah.
did change things for a while, but they pretty much use your standard off the shelf King James Bible for the most part. If you talk like the missionaries
and
that come
if-
to your house.
Yeah, and if anybody has friends who are Mormon, Jehovah's Witness, or anything like that, and you want to, if anybody wants to challenge some of the things we're saying and talking about, please feel
for
free. Go on, write on our Facebook or tag us or Twitter or we now have an Instagram or email us. Hey, we'll maybe even get someone on the show to talk about their perspective on it. We'll get a Mormon on the show or Jehovah's Witness or something. We have no issue with doing that. We'd love to have controlled, friendly conversation on these where maybe we're doing more of an interview or we do a debate too. And it would be, Seth and I would be very respectful. We're not out to beat anybody up or anything. So if anybody knows someone that, if you have a Catholic friend that you know who's maybe more into Catholic apologetics or Eastern Orthodox that would want to come on and talk about their side of canon issues and things like that, that'd be awesome. But just to recap here, a couple of good resources, and I'll link them in the show notes. Dan Wallace, just YouTube, Dan Wallace First Bart Ehrman, YouTube, James White First Bart Ehrman, YouTube, Dan Wallace and New Testament Reliability. He has a half-hour video on there
amazing.
That's really, really good. He has some longer ones,
The dude
too.
is so smart. And he knows,
it's awesome.
it's amazing. And he's in that video.
You can go to, watch that documentary, The God Who Speaks. It's free on Prime if you have a Prime membership. There's a lot of good scholars in that, too. There's the Center for Study for New Testament Manuscripts, or the Center for Research for the Study of New Testament Manuscripts. It's a really long
Something
title.
like that.
Awesome website where you can go and look at high-res pictures of these manuscripts and of these fragments and stuff, where you can if you have especially on your iPads and stuff or your computer, if you have a good screen, you can zoom in and see the frayed edges, of these papyri and stuff. It's so cool. But yeah, guys, the New Testament, we know it says what was originally written back in the first century. You want to discuss and debate the truth of those claims, that's another thing. But the fact is, we know that it says what was originally written by those guys. And that's so cool for us to have that kind of security. It doesn't rest on that. Our beliefs as Christians do not rest on how much historical data we have or how much external evidences there are. But God is gracious and didn't leave us blind faith, right? He left us things to know that He's there. He's real. The heavens declare the glory of God. We know that creation, it tells us about Him. And then He's left us other archaeological things and things like that to just... and all those things should be subject to question. If you're part of a religious group that says don't question things, you should get out of that group.
Yep.
We are, as Christians, we are totally open to challenge and to people asking questions and critiquing the historical veracity of the claims that the Bible makes, the claims that we make. That's not something that Jehovah's Witnesses are allowed to do.
Right.
To be
They
frank,
can't ask questions.
right.
You question, you
Anyway,
are
that's just an
blacklisted. And anyway, we don't want to get off topic too much. We didn't really cover Old Testament because that one, as far as the original whatever, you can sum that up. I mean, Dead Sea Scrolls right there and Isaiah, we know age-wise how far back it goes.
Right.
That is not even I mean, that was decided a long time ago. As far as like we know what was written,
debated,
right?
Disputed topic in the wider world. I'm sure it is in the more academic, but the New Testament's the main thing that comes under fire.
Right.
And so that's just, guys. There's so much internet myth out there that it's just silly. So anyway, we'll post links and debates. I'll actually post some of the James White debates against some of the Islamic scholars he's debated too, in comparison to the Quran and the Bible, to talk about text transmission and stuff like that. Actually, you know, it would be fun, and I bet you I could get him to do it. I could get him on, is Robert Price. James White debated him on New Testament reliability,
talked to him,
something like that. That was my first outing. My first, before I was even into apologetics that much, or theology and understanding. My first outing was on a podcast called Faith and Skepticism that's no longer doing shows, but I think you can still find them. And they brought us on to talk about New Testament canon and stuff like that. And it was against Robert Price, who is a very smart academic man. Fringe skeptic, though.
Yes,
very
like the
fringe
most
guy.
Skeptical of the skeptics. Like,
yeah,
we
as
can't know
friendly
anything
as
for
be,
sure. Yeah, he's a really nice
super
guy.
Nice guy. But that was my first outing. This guy, like, oh my goodness, talk about trial by fire. Thankfully, the guy I was teamed up with, who actually unfortunately passed away last year or the year before, he was only 32, was very educated and very researched on these things. So his name was Chris. But anyway, hope you guys found that interesting. I know it's kind of a very like intense, like laser beam, intense download of information. Ask questions.
Yeah, and we scratched the surface.
Right,
barely.
Just touching the surface. We'll give you more resources.
Yeah.
I lost track of how long we've been recording, so I don't want to. I'm pretty sure
we're like around the 40-minute mark, so we're a little
40-minute
long.
mark. Okay.
We always run a little long.
So
little long is better than a little short, though. So, you know.
It's true. All right, so we're gonna jump out. Sorry about sus dogs in the background.
I don't know if you'll be able to hear them on my good mic.
Hopefully they don't pick up.
Hopefully they don't pick hear them through a different microphone, which picks everything up. So we'll see. I can't keep it's not just my dogs. So I live on a ranch. Real quick, reason we have dogs in the background if you hear them. We live on a ranch. My in-laws use cow dogs, sheep dogs, and there's so many of them, it's impossible to keep them all quiet. I'm sorry. It's just, it's the way it is. You get used to it. But
right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for listening.
I think that wraps it up. And we still don't have a tagline.
Rate us. What? Couldn't hear a word you said.
We still don't have a tagline. We need to get on Twitter and give them a few options as a poll.
Push for
and we'll stick it on Facebook too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do a Twitter poll.
We really need to get
one. Twitter poll.
Yeah.
So again, I'm Samuel Brewer, Samuel Brewer 42. He's at Calvinist Data. And then Steven is at Calvinist Winchester now.
He hasn't been on Twitter for a while. I haven't seen him at all.
Couple days.
Anyhow.
I think he's been around. But shout out to Steven, our producer, who, although us brothers fight and squabble when we're setting things up, we're trying to figure out the best way to do things.
Wouldn't be fun any other way.
We're still we're trying to make things better, and so we're
and we are in a constant struggle for his
we really
soul
appreciate
in regards to Presbyterianism and 1689 federalism. The battle is being waged.
Oh, yeah. Thankfully, I have a leg up on that because he lives down here.
I know. I'm going to have to get Alan to drive down to Florida and rescue him.
Just calm down. Well, you can come down to Florida. That'd be great. But anyway. All right. Thank you, folks. Hope you enjoy. Hit us up. And we'll see you next time on Theology Brewers.